It's strange revisiting all of this, honestly. Life settled back into something resembling normal pretty quickly after I left that job. A different routine, a different city, even a different kind of stress. I built something new, something I actually believed in, and for a long time, that felt like enough. But recently, a few things resurfaced, and writing it all down feels like the only way to understand how it unfolded. It's been a while. Things settled into a rhythm, I guess. A weird rhythm. I'd grab coffee with Jasper most mornings before work. He'd talk, always talk about everything. Old zoning laws, the migration patterns of Canadian geese, the proper way to fold a fitted sheet. It wasn't unpleasant. Exactly, just exhaustive, and he never, ever answered a direct question. You'd ask, "Did you finish the report?" And he'd launch into a 5-minute tangent about the history of paperclips. I started preemptively avoiding questions. It was easier. I figured he was just socially awkward, a bit of an eccentric. I even mentioned it to Edna in accounting, and she just chuckled and said, "Oh, Jasper, he's one of a kind." Then came the email about the business plan, the one I'd been working on in my spare time, the one I hadn't shared with anyone at work. It wasn't a threat, not at first, just a comment, a strangely specific comment about a projected cost analysis. Interesting choice with a vendor, it read. No signature, just sent. I asked Jasper about it, of course. He went on for 20 minutes about the ethical sourcing of coffee beans. I gave up. I figured someone at the office must have overheard me talking about it, maybe gossiping. It was a small office. People talked. A week later, another email. This one mentioned my daughter's school, Luz's school. Specifically the fundraiser they were having. How did anyone know about that? I hadn't mentioned it at work. I checked my social media, made sure I hadn't posted anything. Nothing. It was unsettling. I started to wonder if someone was just messing with me, a really elaborate, tasteless prank. It had to be. I started driving a different way to Luz's school. It was a ridiculous detour, adding 20 minutes to the commute, but it felt necessary. I told myself it was just being cautious, overreacting probably. But the thought of someone watching stuck with me. That email about the fundraiser wasn't just knowing about it, it was the specific time, and the bake sale table Luz was assigned to. How? Then there was the thing with Weston. Weston from accounting. He'd always been off, quiet, but he'd appear in the break room when I was alone, just to make coffee. He never said much. A few days after I changed my route, I saw him parked across the street from Luz's school. Not during drop-off or pickup, just there, sitting. He saw me too. He didn't wave, didn't look surprised. He just watched. I told myself it was a coincidence, a really awful coincidence. Weston lived nearby. Maybe he was waiting for someone. But then that evening, another email arrived. It wasn't about Luz or work. It was about my mother's birthday. My mother lives 3 states away. I hadn't spoken to anyone about her birthday in weeks. The email didn't threaten, didn't demand anything. It just acknowledged it. Hope she has a good one. That's all. I started looking at everyone differently. Edna in HR, always asking about my weekend. Hector, who always seemed to be near my office. Even Yael, who I'd always thought was just overly enthusiastic about marketing strategies. Could it be any of them, or all of them, somehow? I started thinking about the security cameras in the office and who had access to the building's records. It felt like I was living inside someone else's plan, and I was always a step behind. The email came on Tuesday. It wasn't a threat. Not exactly. Just a picture. A grainy image, clearly taken with a phone, of Lena's dance recital. It was taken from the back of the auditorium. You could barely see her, just the flash of her pink costume. The date stamp was yesterday. I hadn't even told anyone we were going. Not really. I just mentioned it in passing to Yael, I think, when we were comparing weekend plans. I called Weston, our IT guy. He was unhelpful. He said the office network was secure. Firewalls were up to date. The usual. He kept glancing at his watch. I asked about the building security footage, but he said that was handled by management, and he didn't have access. It felt like everyone was giving me practiced, empty responses. Then, this morning, I was dropping Lena off at school and saw Hector. He was across the street, leaning against the hardware store. He was just watching. He wasn't doing anything, wasn't approaching just there. He saw me, gave a quick, almost apologetic half-wave, and then turned away. That's when I started to really panic. It had to be Hector. He was the quiet one, the one nobody really noticed. He must have been building some kind of case against me, some ridiculous grievance. Maybe he thought I'd slighted him somehow, passed him over for a promotion. It was pathetic, really, but the feeling was so strong, so visceral. I went straight to the police. They took a report, asked a lot of questions, but honestly, I could tell they didn't take it seriously. Harassing emails and a man standing across the street. The officer actually sighed. Then, coming home from work, I found a single red rose on my windshield. There was no note, just a rose, and a small, almost invisible scratch on the driver's side door, like someone had deliberately, carefully run a key along it. That's when I knew it wasn't about work anymore. It wasn't Hector, it was something else, something much, much worse. And I didn't have a plan, I just drove. I drove until I was somewhere unfamiliar. I found a motel outside of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I just pulled off the highway and paid cash. I didn't even ask for a receipt. It smelled like disinfectant and regret. I sat there for hours just staring at the static on the TV. I kept replaying everything. Hector's emails, the rose, the scratch. It wasn't logical. Hector was annoying, sure, he was ambitious to a fault. But this wasn't about the business plan anymore, not even close. I called Edna in HR again. She was sympathetic, but mostly she kept talking about company policy. She said, document everything, like documenting would stop someone from knowing what my daughter ate for breakfast. I told her about the rose and the scratch. She paused, then said, have you considered a restraining order against Hector? It felt dismissive, like she thought I was overreacting. I hung up. Then I remembered Weston, the quiet guy in IT. He always seemed to know things, little things about everyone. I called him and left a message. He called back within 5 minutes. That was too fast. He asked, "What can I do for you?" And it didn't sound like a question. I explained everything. He listened and didn't interrupt. Then, he said, I ran a trace on Hector's IP address. He's been using a VPN, a good one, bouncing all over the place, makes it difficult. He paused. But I noticed something else. A few weeks ago, someone accessed your personnel file. Not Hector, someone internal, using Weston's credentials. That's when it hit me. It wasn't about Hector trying to sabotage my new venture. It was about someone watching me, studying me, building a profile. Hector was just a distraction, a clumsy attempt to see how I'd react. This was someone who already knew a lot about my life, maybe someone who knew everything. It's been years. I still think about it, not constantly, but it surfaces. A smell, a particular shade of gray, a certain kind of silence. I haven't spoken to Weston since, not by choice, exactly. He just faded out of my life after I left Pennsylvania. He sent a few emails, checking in and asking if I'd reported anything new. I told him no, I didn't want to. I didn't want to drag him into it further. I moved back to the city and got a new job. A smaller firm, less ambitious, less visible, I guess. I kept expecting something, some continuation of whatever it was, but it never came, not directly. There were things. Little things, a wrong number calling at 3 a.m., always silent. Packages delivered to my old address that weren't mine, a car that looked familiar parked down the street for a few days. I convinced myself it was residual fallout from Hector. He'd always been petty and vindictive. Maybe he'd hired someone to harass me, a low-level annoyance campaign. It felt contained, like that. Annoying, yes, but not the creeping, pervasive feeling of being known that I'd had in that motel. I started noticing things about people, not suspicious things, necessarily just details. A way someone held their phone, the brand of shoes someone wore, the contents of their grocery cart. I'd catalog them in my head, useless information. I realized I was doing it when Luz, from accounting, commented on my new scarf. I'd mentally noted her husband's car make and model 5 minutes earlier. Now, I avoid networking events. Anything with open seating and strangers. I used to be good at them, made connections easily. Now, too much observation, too much data. I prefer to meet people one-on-one, in familiar places. Places I've chosen. I don't like being surprised by who's in the room. I don't like rooms I haven't thoroughly scanned first. I was 24, barely a year out of nursing school, and working the night shift at a fairly quiet community hospital. It wasn't glamorous, mostly routine checkups and a lot of elderly patients, but it was steady work and I needed that. I just moved into a small apartment off the highway, one of those places where you could always hear the distant hum of traffic, and was finally feeling like a proper adult. Everything felt manageable, predictable, even a little boring. The night was slow. Dillard mostly slept, which was a relief, honestly. It was the staring when he was awake. Not at me, exactly. More like through me. And the mirroring. It hadn't stopped. Every little adjustment I made, smoothing my hair, crossing my legs, he'd do it a beat later. It was subtle enough that Dr. Fitch hadn't noticed when he'd rounded earlier. I'd mentioned it to Prue at the nurse's station, but she just laughed and said old people do that, trying to connect, dear, it's sweet. Sweet wasn't the word. It was unnerving. I was charting, trying to focus on Dillard's slightly elevated blood pressure, when I felt it again. A cold spot right behind my neck, not a draft, the vents were off, and the room was warm. Just a pocket of cold. I shivered and rubbed the back of my neck, and then Dillard, still half asleep, did the same. Exactly the same. I told myself it was coincidence. My imagination running wild from too much coffee. I'd been pulling a lot of extra shifts, trying to save for the down payment on the apartment. It was a nice place, close to the highway, but the traffic noise was persistent. Then, while I was adjusting his IV drip, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the window, and I swore. Just for a split second, I saw someone standing behind me. Not Dillard, someone else. When I whipped around, nothing. Just the sterile white walls and the hum of the machines. I dismissed it as exhaustion. I'd been getting those little visual glitches lately. Stress, probably. Still, I kept glancing over my shoulder the rest of the shift. The next night, I took the stairs, all 4 flights. It just felt better than waiting for the elevator. It was a stupid thing, really. The hospital isn't that big. But the elevator always felt enclosed, and I kept thinking about that glimpse in the window with Dillard. It wasn't just exhaustion, I knew that. I was checking charts at the nurse's station when Kaz came up, grinning. Avoiding the metal box, huh? Good for your glutes. He was the IT guy. He always hovered, fixing printers, muttering about network speeds, harmless. He asked if I'd seen the memo about the system upgrade over the weekend. I hadn't. He said it was important for data security, which, okay, sure, hospitals and data. Then he paused and looked pointedly at me. You went to Crestwood, right? Around 15 years ago? I froze. Crestwood. My stomach dropped. It was a small private college. I hadn't talked about it in years. Yeah, briefly. Transferred after 1 year. Kaz's grin widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. Small world. I was a late bloomer. Started a few years after you left. He said you left like it was a significant event. He knew I transferred because of Oren. I hadn't told anyone at this hospital about Oren. Funny, I always wondered what happened to Prue Henderson. Heard she became a nurse. How did he know my maiden name? That's what I should have asked. But I just stammered. That's me. He nodded slowly. Right. Well, enjoy your evening. You know, data security is a big deal these days. He walked away, and I suddenly felt incredibly cold, like that spot by Dillard's room, but everywhere. I thought maybe he was just nosy, a weirdo who dug up old yearbooks, but then I remembered the timing, the visual glitch, Dillard's mirroring, and now this. He'd been watching me. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Oren's face, that slow nod, and the yearbook photo. How I hadn't even thought about Tam in years. Not really. College was a lifetime ago. I kept replaying the conversation. Westwood, right? He hadn't asked if I'd gone to Westwood, just stated it, like he already knew. The shift was brutal. Dillard was agitated, kept calling for his glasses even though they were on his face. Prue was out with the flu, so it was just me and Rosie on the floor. Around 3 a.m., the call light for room 308, Kenji started blinking. I went in and everything was off. Not medically off, just arranged. His books were stacked perfectly on the bedside table. The TV was angled directly at the chair like someone had been sitting there, and a single white rose lay on his pillow. Kenji is allergic to roses. I called Rosie, told her something felt wrong. She said I was probably just tired. But then I saw it. A small folded piece of paper tucked under the rose. I unfolded it. One word typed, "Remember." My heart hammered. I ripped the paper, threw it in the trash. It had to be a prank, some messed up patient. But then I remembered Edison, the IT guy, saying data security is a big deal these days. He'd been sending a message, trying to scare me. I went to the nurse's station, needing to tell someone. Anyone. Oren wasn't there, of course. But his computer was logged in, screensaver off, displaying a file. It was a picture. Not of me, of Tam from a concert. Years ago, he'd circled her face, and underneath the image, a single line of text. He knows too. I slammed the computer shut, adrenaline spiking. It wasn't about Westwood. It wasn't about some harmless college memory. It was about her. And someone was threatening. Someone was threatening to reveal something about Tam. Something I didn't even know. I had to find Oren. Now, I needed to talk to someone outside the hospital. Someone who wouldn't just look at me funny or disappear when I asked about Oren. I called Kenji. We'd been friends since nursing school. He's a detective now, homicide. He always had a knack for putting things together. I told him everything about Kaz, the pictures, Oren's computer. I left out the really old stuff about Tam. I just said it was someone from my past, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Kenji listened, quiet for a long time after I finished. He said it sounded like someone was messing with me, trying to scare me. He asked about Kaz, a lot of questions about his behavior. Did he seem fixated? Did he ask about my personal life? I thought about the way he'd always appear when I was alone with a chart, the casual questions about my weekend. It seemed less creepy, more efficient if he was just building a profile for some kind of hospital security thing. Maybe Kaz was internal affairs or something. Kenji said he'd look into it, run Kaz's background, and see if anything came up. He asked about Oren. I told him about the picture, the note. He knows too. Kenji's voice changed. He said Oren had a record, nothing major, a few petty thefts when he was younger, but a pattern of digital intrusion. He'd been flagged for suspicious activity 2 years back, some investigation into unauthorized access to private databases. It was dismissed due to a lack of evidence. Kenji said he'd check with his contacts, see if he could dig up anything more. He called back later that night. Just one sentence. Oren left the state. He is driving, there is no destination. And then, almost as an afterthought, he emptied his bank account. That's when it hit me. It wasn't about Tam, it was about Oren. He was the one doing this. He was trying to frame Kaz, to make me think someone else was involved. It was a twisted game, and I was just a pawn. It's been years. I still think about Oren. Not every day, but often enough. It's not fear, exactly. More like a permanent low hum of awareness. Like knowing there's a faulty wire somewhere in the house, and you just wait for the short. The hospital did an internal review, of course. They tightened security. They blamed it on a disgruntled ex-employee. Oren was easy enough to paint as the villain. They never really understood what had happened with Tam, or with the notes, or the picture. They wanted a clean explanation, and Oren provided one by disappearing. I tried to piece it together after the college connection. We were both in the computer science program, but barely knew each other. He was quiet, always hunched over a keyboard. I remember a project, a shared server space. He helped me debug something, a stupid little program for a photography class. That was it, a favor. But he was good, really good. I figured he'd held a grudge, maybe I'd gotten a better grade, something like that. A petty academic rivalry blown out of proportion over 10 years. It made a kind of sick sense. I went to therapy for a while. They talked about trauma, about boundaries. It didn't feel like trauma. It felt like exposure, like someone had peeled back a layer of my life I didn't know existed and found something ugly underneath. I don't go to tech meetups anymore. I used to enjoy them. the energy, the shared passion. But now if I'm in a room with a lot of young men talking about code, I just leave. It's not a conscious decision. Not really. My feet just start moving toward the door. I can't explain it. I don't want to. I just know I don't want to be around them. Not anymore. I still remember the chipped formica of the diner counter, a pale orange with dark rings where mugs had sat. It was always late, nearing 3 in the morning, after a shift stocking shelves at the distribution center on the edge of town. I'd grab coffee and a stale donut before the long drive home, trying to shake off the warehouse dust and the quiet. That job paid the bills, but the writing, the freelance stuff, was supposed to be the way out. The coffee was good. Diner coffee. Not great, not terrible, just what you needed if you were running on fumes. I finished the last of it and glanced at my watch. It was 2:15. I should have been back at the distribution center 10 minutes ago, but honestly, the quiet was a relief. I hadn't even realized how much the hum of the machines got to me until I wasn't hearing it. Dillard was still there, hunched over a plate of fries. He hadn't said much, just a nod when I'd sat down. He seemed focused, like he was meticulously arranging the fries before eating them. Odd, but people are odd. I was about to head out when I noticed him talking to Midge, the waitress. It was a quick exchange, barely audible. Then Midge was already walking towards the kitchen. A minute later, she came back with another plate. It wasn't for him, though. She set it down in front of him, a full breakfast, eggs, bacon, toast, the works. He hadn't even finished half his fries. I swear he'd just ordered those fries, maybe 5 minutes ago. It was fast. I figured maybe she felt bad for him, saw him sitting alone. Or maybe he'd pre-ordered while he was using the restroom. That made sense. People do that sometimes. Still, the timing was weird, and Midge didn't usually go out of her way for anyone. She was efficient, not friendly. He barely looked up as she placed the food down. Just a quick thanks. He started on the eggs immediately, using his fork to dissect them, separating the yolk from the white. It was precise, like he was performing some kind of surgery. He didn't seem to be enjoying it. He just consumed it, methodically. I cleared my throat, figuring I should head back. I'd lingered long enough. As I stood, Dillard finally looked up. His eyes met mine, and he gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't a friendly nod. It felt acknowledging, like he knew I was leaving, and like he'd been waiting for me to. The air outside was colder than I remembered. I unlocked the truck, fumbling with the key. That nod from Dillard bothered me. Not in a "this guy is a weirdo" way, but calculated. I glanced back at the diner. He was still there, same position, just watching. I told myself it was the light, the late hour, making shadows do things. I took the long way home, sticking to the highway instead of cutting through Old Mill Road. Usually Old Mill is faster, with less traffic, but tonight I didn't want to be on those back roads. It felt stupid, like I was avoiding something imaginary, but the feeling was strong. Then I saw him. Not Dillard. Another patrol car, same black and white, same everything. It was parked a few blocks from my apartment, facing the opposite direction. I slowed down, trying to see who was inside. I couldn't make it out. Probably just routine patrol, right? Still, I parked around the corner from my building and walked the last 2 blocks. I noticed it when I was unlocking my door. A small, plain envelope was tucked under my doormat. There was no return address. Inside was a photograph, a picture of my truck taken at the diner. It was clear as day, and a note typed, not handwritten, "Enjoying your evening." My gut twisted. It wasn't about a speeding ticket. This wasn't random. Maybe Dillard had a thing for me. Some creepy obsession that felt contained, manageable, but the photograph felt different, professional, almost, like someone knew what they were doing. It wasn't Dillard. He was too off. This was someone else, someone who used Dillard, someone watching. I kept seeing the car, not constantly but enough. Always a dark sedan, always a few blocks off, always when I was doing something normal, picking up groceries, going to the hardware store. It wasn't following, not exactly, more like positioning, like it wanted to be seen peripherally, and it was always driven by the same guy. Not Dillard, This one was older, heavier set, graying hair, always wearing sunglasses, even at night. I started varying my route to work, taking back roads. That's when the notes started changing. Less threats, more requests. Odd ones, a specific brand of coffee, a book I'd mentioned to Midge once at the diner, a first edition apparently. Things were getting weird. I figured it was escalating. Some power play. He wanted to see how much I'd bend. Then came the call. Tam, from the auto shop. She said a man had been asking about my truck. He described it perfectly. He asked about my schedule. He said he was an insurance adjuster. Tam said he was polite, but she couldn't shake the feeling he was fishing. That's when I decided I needed to get out of town. Just disappear for a few days. Pack a bag. Tell my boss I had a family emergency. I was halfway through the driveway when I saw him. The man from the sedan, he wasn't in the car. He was standing on the sidewalk just watching, and in his hand he held something small and silver, a badge. He didn't say a word, just lifted it slightly. It wasn't a local badge. I didn't recognize it. He wasn't even in uniform. I threw the truck in reverse, tires spitting gravel. I didn't think, didn't plan, just moved. He didn't pursue, just stood there, the badge glinting in the afternoon sun. I drove until I hit the highway, until the city was a smear in the rearview mirror. I just had to get away. I convinced myself it was a rogue agent, some kind of federal thing. A sting gone wrong. That made sense, right? Someone messing with a small-time writer. It had to be. I kept driving for hours. I ended up in a motel outside of Harrisburg. I slept for maybe 3 or 4 hours. I just kept replaying it. The badge. It wasn't local. Definitely not. I called my editor, Marcus, and told him I needed an extension on the article. I said I was sick. He didn't push. Marcus is good like that, mostly. Then I did the thing I probably shouldn't have. I called the state police. I explained it as best I could. A man claiming to be law enforcement, no uniform, flashing a badge I didn't recognize. I asked about off-duty officers and federal agents working with local PD. The guy on the phone, a Sergeant Lyle, was polite enough, but he was dismissive. He said they get a lot of these calls. People are confused about jurisdiction. He asked if I was sure I wasn't mistaken. I told him about the photo and the requests. He took notes, but his tone changed. It became clinical. It was like I was bothering him. He said they'd look into it, but didn't seem to think it was worth the effort. He asked if I'd been involved in anything illegal. I told him I was a writer. He chuckled. Everyone's a writer these days. I found an old newspaper online, a local paper from that city. I was just scrolling through the archives trying to find something, anything, about a similar badge. And I found a small article tucked away on page 7. It was about a warehouse fire, a raid gone wrong. The article mentioned a task force, a joint operation with the ATF, and a name, Dillard. It had a photo. It wasn't a clear one, but it was him. That's when it hit me. He wasn't targeting me. He was using me. I was just in the wrong place and saw something I shouldn't have. Maybe the warehouse fire was connected to whatever he was doing. Some kind of cover-up. I felt a little sick. I felt a little relieved, actually. It wasn't personal, just bad luck. I could just disappear, change my name, start over. Then my phone rang. It was Tam, from the auto shop. She said she'd found a part I'd asked about for my truck. She said she could have it delivered. Delivered where? I asked. She just said, wherever you are, and then she hung up. It was weeks, maybe months, after that motel. I moved again, of course. Small town in Ohio this time. I tried to blend. It didn't really work. Not completely. I kept expecting something. A knock, a phone call. Another Tam showing up with a truck part I didn't need. It never came, not exactly. But there were things. Little things. A car that looked a lot like his, dark blue, older model sedan, parked down the street for a couple of days. A man in a baseball cap who seemed to be always watching. I told myself it was paranoia. Small towns breed that. Everyone knows everyone's business. Still, I started varying my route to the grocery store. I took the long way around. I tried to find out more about Dillard. I used the internet, public records. Nothing substantial turned up. A few old business filings, a couple of traffic tickets. It was like he didn't really exist, which maybe that was the point. Maybe he was someone who was supposed to be invisible, a facilitator, someone who made things happen for other people that fit. It explained the badge, the confidence. He wasn't law enforcement. He worked with law enforcement. I still think about Ray, the woman at the diner. She seemed genuinely scared when I asked about the warehouse. Maybe she knew something. Maybe she was involved. I should have pushed it. I didn't. I just left. I haven't driven my truck since. Not really. It sits in the driveway, covered. I keep meaning to get it fixed, get it running again, but I don't. Every time I walk past it, I check the tires, every single time. Just a quick glance to make sure they haven't been touched. I don't even know why anymore. It just happens.